And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security. And I have a great pleasure to introduce Carolina Angelis, who is a senior advisor for cybersecurity at Truesec. Hi, Carolina. Thanks very much for joining me. How are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm great. Thanks.
So I'm super excited for several reasons. One, you do not reside in the U.S., and that makes me feel great because we are so U.S. North American centric. And not very often I get the chance to interview people that are outside of that realm of geography. So, so I appreciate it. I know it's late where you are, so I appreciate it. We're just getting close to the holidays. So I very much appreciate you joining me today. So why don't we get started? You have a phenomenal background. Maybe you can share with us how you started in cybersecurity.
Well, we have to go back like 30 years, almost. Next year it will be 30 years. That's
Wow.
when I started working for the Swedish signals intelligence, or within the Swedish signals intelligence. I was like 21, studied Russian at the university, and this was my first real job. After that, I moved on to Swedish military intelligence service. And then after, I think, 20 years, almost 2 decades, I left and started working for Saab. I don't know if you know that company, but it's fighters and the Griffin. It's Swedish fighter jet. And that's where I came across with cybersecurity for the first time, I would say. Today, I'm working at Truesec, as you said, and before that, I spent a few years running my own business within cybersecurity. However, my focus has never been the technical threats or technical solutions.
That's right. So, but before we dive into that, so how did you get to be selected, to the Swedish, signal intelligence? That's quite interesting because, again, being U.S. centric, we almost don't realize that most countries, if not all countries, have, similar entities like we do. And also the people that are qualified and get selected, that's a pretty serious process, and not everyone gets selected. It's they're very picky in terms of who they pick. Maybe talk to me about that. What was that like to be selected and then go through some sort of, I'm assuming you went through some very rigorous training as well.
Well, of course, I guess it's probably much the same in the US and Sweden and most countries. But this was a long time ago. But the main reason I started working there was because of my language skills. And as you probably know, within signals intelligence and intelligence, there is a need for language skills, different language skills. So that was why I started, and then of course there were tests and so on.
So did you speak multiple languages before you joined, and how would they test? So I know I'm familiar with the intelligence community here, and the people. It's pretty amazing. They go through very intensive training, and within very short period of time, they acquire a new language. Did you speak any other languages when you joined?
Well, I studied in Sweden. You start learning English in school when you're like 9 or 10, and then you get to choose another language after that, like most German or French, since it's Europe, and then maybe another language after that. And that's when I started to learn Russian. So it was just because I liked the language and thought it would be cool to know a language that not many people in Sweden speak. So I knew Russian already before, and I got better, of course, at the university. So that was the main reason that I ended up there.
And it's pretty amazing, though, that somebody that age decides to pick up another language just because it's cool. And I guess you picked up definitely the right one. It's very useful to speak Russian language, especially in your particular profession. So why Russian? You just thought, just one day you said, okay, Russian sounds cool, and I'll just try to be proficient.
Not really. I had, when I was like 13 to 15 in school, I had a teacher, and I knew that she spoke Russian. She had studied it as I did later on. So I just thought, wow, why not? I mean, Spanish, everyone speaks Spanish, or German. So that's why I chose Russian, and it turned out to be a good choice, because that's why I am where I am today. If I hadn't known Russian, I wouldn't have started working there, and the next job and the next job, etc.
Isn't
So
it?
even, yeah.
It's so incredible, and I have to stop you because it just really is super incredible that you know, a basically you picked a fork in the road at that age, and that really propelled you throughout your career and your life just by
Mhm.
picking kind of the right, the right choice at the time, and you just happened to stumble upon a teacher that
Yeah.
he looked up to, and it's pretty incredible.
Mm.
And then you did that, and and again, I have to ask this question. When I think about Sweden, I think of peaceful country, right? Like, what. And it's very unlike the U.S. The U.S. has a lot of enemies, at least just is perceived a lot of enemies. You know, who does Sweden protect themselves from? This is, and again, maybe I'm asking the wrong question here, but I'm just very curious about that.
No, it's not a wrong question, and all the security services, not only in Europe, in Sweden, but in our neighboring countries as well, have the same, in the security reports, the annual reports, point out the same countries as Russia, China, and Iran as the major intelligence threats towards our countries. And that, of course, doesn't mean that they are the only ones conducting espionage, gathering intelligence, but it's said to be the main threat. And I mean, Russia is a geographical where Sweden is located. So of course we're close to the Baltic Sea and to the neighboring countries, and close to the former Soviet Union. So it has always been like that, and I think that we can understand why. And it's not that we're afraid of an invasion from Russia or China or any other country, but it's intelligence gathering. Intelligence is always about trying to understand what will happen in the near future and later on as well.
Yeah, and I think we in the kind of pre-conversation I mentioned that recently I watched the Queen's Gambit, and
Mhm.
the this amazing chess player learned how to speak Russian so she could basically spy, quote unquote, on the Russian player. So throughout those years that you became proficient, and by the way, you obviously speak other languages as well. So how many languages in total?
Or speak is too much today. It's a bit rusty. Um, but a couple of them, like French and some Polish, and
And
yeah.
and Russia, despite being a relatively speaking, smaller country in population and as well as GDP, has quite the lion's share in terms of kind of cybersecurity activity. So it must have been very very useful. Do you remember kind of the first time you utilized the newly acquired or very proficient Russian skills to detect some potential malicious and adversary activity? Do you remember what was it like?
So I'm not sure that I understand that question. So
So you learned how to speak Russian, right? So you became very proficient. So then, would you like describe like the first time you listened to a potential malicious conversation between between Russians, and then you were able to decipher that because of your acquired skill? Do you remember what was it like?
no, I sorry, I don't have any comment on that.
That's okay. So moving forward, so you then moved to work with a defense contractor, a very large one as well.
Mhm.
And when you said you kind of discovered cybersecurity, did you? And again, cybersecurity is not even the term itself wasn't even around back then, right? So what was kind of the first exposure to this particular discipline for you?
Well, again, when we're talking about cybersecurity, and there's a big focus on technical threats and technical security solutions, and that has never been my thing. My focus has been the people working in a company, for example, and how they can be exploited in a cyber attack. So it's, of course, it's cybersecurity, but I do not recall a certain time when when there was a cyber incident in that way that you're describing and talking about.
Yeah, but no, but it's so interesting because you're right. The majority of the cyber attacks happen not necessarily because, yeah, maybe it was a technical glitch, but there's a or technical vulnerability, but there's always the human element associated with it, either through the delivery of the malware, by clicking, by convincing somebody to install. So this area of essentially the cyber human threat intelligence piece is something that you specialize in. Maybe we can kind of talk about that for a bit. What are the kind of the pillars of concern when we're talking about specifically about the kind of the human threat intelligence for enterprise and large enterprise?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
So
the pillars.
Yeah, so the pillars. But I mean, one of kind of the main concerns, the way people get exploited working for a company, and how they, what is kind of the end results of it. Maybe it's a few use cases, whether it's insider employees or somebody who got extorted, or I mean, there's a couple. There's almost a couple variations of that particular area of discipline where people get exploited and eventually become the trigger to a to a cyber attack, right?
Well, if you talk about threat actors, there are both the state actors, but also the criminal organizations or individuals that exploit people on the inside. And what they do is that they try to find someone with a vulnerability, and that vulnerability could be a need of money, or someone, a disgruntled employee, or a personality, like a narcissistic or grandiose personality, or someone that they can threaten or blackmail into cooperation. So the reasons they are trying to find someone on the inside with some sort of vulnerability that they can exploit. And we've seen quite a few examples of this recently. We had one case in Sweden like 3 years ago where an IT consultant working for both Volvo Cars and Scania, with trucks and autonomous vehicles, that the Russian intelligence service had recruited this IT consultant, and he had been spying for Russia for approximately 3 years. So that is one case. And we also have other cases where in the US, for example, one famous one, where a Russian guy tried to recruit a person working in the factory, in the Tesla factory, and tried to make him bring memory stick with malicious code and put in his computer on the inside of the factory. And this didn't succeed. So we have quite a few examples now from where this happened.
And Carolina, it's so interesting that because these cases are they're not like widely advertised like like the rest of the cybersecurity incidents. It seems like it's almost like an afterthought. This is kind of the first time I hear about these cases, despite me doing this for for a long time. Why is that? Is it not this area of human threat intelligence? Is that not an area of concern, or did you see that this area is getting more exposure these days, but it wasn't, for example, 3 years ago?
I think this is a problem that is increasing because we're actually getting better at cybersecurity and protecting our systems and data. which means it's getting more difficult for an attacker, for a threat actor, to create access from a distance via, for example, a cyber attack. And what happens is that the attacker doesn't stop wanting this information or this access, so they will try to find another solution, and they will recruit someone on the inside, despite how or why this person on the inside is recruited. So we will see more of this. And this is like, they say that human intelligence, recruiting spies or people with access, that's the world's second oldest job. So this will not stop. This will continue. And as we're getting better and better at protecting our technical systems, this will be the way in, because there will always be people on the inside with access, and they just need to find one person who's not loyal, who could be convinced to help them.
Yeah, it's super interesting, because as soon as you recruit one of these people, then you bypass all the security controls, including the firewalls, potentially the, any security, like, we talk about zero trust, right? But zero trust, it's just something that, from somebody trying to get from the outside in. So let's talk about the kind of the older section of this piece, like the recruitment section. How does that work? How does anybody, one of those adversaries, reach out and find out who is that disgruntled employee, who has something to lose? Because again, you need there's a lot of legwork here. There's a lot of intelligence that's required, and I'm assuming that process also takes quite a bit of time, right? So to establish that relationship with somebody that is then willing to, create actions for you, malicious actions for you. What's that process look like for for these folks, for the adversaries? How do they go about recruiting these individuals?
This is interesting, because it's the same process. It doesn't matter which country is doing this. It's the same process. First, you have a need of information, and then you try to understand where can we find this information, which company or institution, and the department even. And then after that, okay, so who's working there? Who are the people working there who have access to that certain piece of information? And when you have one or several names, you try to map them to understand who they are. Are there any vulnerabilities, of course, but also family situation, interest, financial situation, things like that. And these are this is information that today, with internet and all the social media, that could be found in, for example, with Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever. So then when you have identified one or more, you want a plan to contact them. So you try to set up a first meeting or arrange rather a first meeting where which feels like a coincidence. You're seated next to this person at the flight. You attend the same event, or something that play at the same golf course, for example.
Sounds almost like to me, when you describing this, almost like a scene from a movie, because we always see that in spy movies where somebody sits at the bar and they order the same drink and they bump into each other, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're like a secret agent, right? Is that so? That really happens?
It happens, yes. So that's why the movies are like they are. So not, of course, all of them are very close to the truth, but some are. So that's how you do it. And you want to make this first meeting feel like interesting, so that there will be another meeting. So if you bump into each other the first time, maybe you exchange business cards, if people have that today, and then plan for a next meeting. So if that turns out well, you wanted to get the other person to, do small things for you, and they get something from you, like a small amount of money or a gift rather, and then you make them questions more and more difficult. The first ones, they are not sensitive at all, but then you step it up, and when the person answers questions that they really shouldn't answer, you can assume that they are recruited. It doesn't have to be that this is said out loud, but that both know that that's what has happened.
And it's so hard to, as a company, it's super hard to to really to find out who that person is. It can be anyone essentially. And I know there are some tools, for example, that profile what's a normal behavior, for example. So behavioral analysis for employees. So if, for example, if they end up transferring files at like 2 o'clock in the morning, it will raise a red flag. But these tools don't necessarily help so much to uncover, kind of the adversaries from within, because they potentially can keep on doing their everyday, activities, but in disguise that humans are very good at disguising abnormal activities, especially if they're familiar with the normal actions. And then I think that all of us working from home from post COVID, that also makes it difficult, because now you only have to pretend on a few Zoom calls, right? You don't have to necessarily be in the office. So what can companies do to defend themselves? Well, first, I guess there's two sections. That one is to be proactive, right? So prevent something like that, and then post something like that, so reactive. Is maybe some recommendations from you will be absolutely great.
Well, to be proactive, who you hire matters. So who you let on the inside, who you give access to the systems and the information. So I would say start when hiring new people, and not just the new employees, but also consultants, people who will have access in the systems. And this is difficult, no doubt about it. But to have a security vetting, to have the security security vetting interviews, and to ask the difficult questions to get to know this person, because it is possible to find out like bad attitudes and loyalties and things that could make it better not to hire a person, because it could be a risk.
And there are companies out there that do some vetting, right, before like background check. But again, it's my belief that most of them are, pretty shallow in terms of how deep do they go. So, for example, they check, okay, this person have a master's degree. They go and okay, check. This person worked at these companies. Okay, check. But they don't necessarily, go one level deeper than that, right? Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think the background check is one thing, and it is important, because it has shown that some people fake their background. So that's something that we would like to know before, because if they're lying about who they are and what they did, they will probably lie about more things and be disloyal at the end. So I think the security vetting interview is really important, and the person conducting the interview need to be a person who understands what to look for, what questions to ask, who understands the threat actors and their modus operandi. Because if they don't know what to look for and how to read the answers, then the interview is there's no point with it. So don't let the manager do it, or maybe not even the HR department, because they are looking for skills and they're looking for positive personalities to, if this person will fit in the group. What a security vetting interview is to find other things, like the warning signs.
Yeah, and I don't know of that many companies that do that today, that actually have a security vetting interview. As you mentioned, the majority of them go through the process of looking for the skill set, looking for cultural fit, behavioral fit, and so on, but not so much in the security vetting components of it. And what about once the employee gets hired, right? life changes all the time, and sometimes there's a wrench that's thrown into your wheel, and your situation can go from from higher to dire very quickly, right?
Mm.
So maybe like something happened to your family and so on. So how do you then monitor for that, after the employee is already part of the company?
It's a really good point, because the companies that do the security vetting when hiring, they're happy with that, and then forget, as you say, that life changes, things happen, and loyalties might change as well. So we need to do a follow up on this. I don't know, every year, every second year. And this is also about caring about the employees. So it's not like looking for people to get rid of. It's more like taking the temperature on the organization and checking how people are, because one of the most common reasons for people to becoming disloyal and an insider is because they're not happy at work. They're not happy with decisions or what's happening.
Yeah, excuse me, the leadership as well, right? So they may disagree with the leadership. What about the organizational culture in terms of security awareness? How does that take effect and help in mitigation of that type of risk?
Well, that's one thing that I really is close to my heart. I do a lot of awareness training with companies and
Sure, that's why I
organizations.
ask. I know it is,
You
so
knew
I'm
that
just teeing
already,
you up.
so perfect. So, I think this is so important that we have the awareness training, because if the employees understand what the threat looks like and that there might be threat actors interested in what we do, then it's easier for us to be compliant with rules, but also to, if something happens, to notice it and to be able to report it. Because if we think that this isn't even happening, no one is recruiting spies today, well, how can we even see if it happens
I'm
to us?
I'm very smiling about that because so everybody's recruiting spies. So I guess you have to tell them that some of the James Bond movies are actually real life depiction of what's happening in the corporate environment as well.
Yeah, maybe not so much the James Bond movies, but I understand what you mean. So yes, it is happening, and it's not just the high tech companies or working in the defense industry. This could happen to any company. And what we see today is also that the criminal organizations, hacker organizations, are recruiting people on the inside, which means that no one is safe. If you have a good turnover and you use technical platforms, which everyone does, then you could be targeted. And this is what we've seen.
And so talk to me about the security awareness training and what does that mean to you? Because again, in my mind, a lot of companies, what they do today is they have the employee on an annual or quarterly basis view a couple of videos, and then they
I
have
know.
to agree to you're smiling
Mm,
again, you're
yeah.
agree to some contract, agree to some code of
Mm,
contact, and
mm,
they're done.
mm.
And I'm assuming that's not enough, right?
I believe in engaging people
Hmm.
to make them understand, as I think I've said already, but to understand that this is happening for real and it could happen to us, it could happen to me. So if you, when I do awareness training, I give a lot of examples. I told you about the IT consultant in Sweden a couple of years ago, but there are so many more examples from not only Europe, of course, but the US and all over the world where this has happened. So when you talk about cases, real cases, people understand that, okay, that was an ordinary employee and he was approached and recruited because he had some access. It doesn't have to be a key individual. It was enough that he had access to the system or could create access to what they were interested in. So if it could happen to him, it could happen to me.
Now, in kind of the technical world, there is the notion of pen testing an organization to see if there's any vulnerabilities in the infrastructure. Is there an equivalent of that in kind of the human threat intelligence aspect of it?
Well, this is difficult. There are things that you could do to test. You could approach employees and see if they would answer questions that they shouldn't. I mean, approach them at a bar. So, but is it okay to do that? I'm not sure if any organization would take the risk and do that, because what happens if the person actually, if the test succeeds and the person hands out information, then you have a really big problem on what to do with that. So it's possible, but it's difficult.
So it's a it's a double-edged sword. If you succeed, you fail, almost like it's almost it's very difficult. So so is there a formal insider prevention program for most organizations? Is that something that the executives are aware of and are actively, proactively engaging with people like yourself, consultants, that allows them to create a program around that to prevent these from happening? Or is it something that's still early?
I think it's still early, but there are companies that are doing this, and we are also creating an insider prevention program right now. And we believe in starting with like a health check to take the temperature on the organization and to see what recommendations and where to start. So that's there are things to do, and I think that the simple things is like as I said to do the security vetting, do the awareness training, do the follow-up, dare to ask the questions how people are, because it's also about concern for the employees.
Do you ever get called in, Carolina, after the fact, if something happened, to investigate and to see kind of lessons learned and how to prevent that from happening? Is there any interesting cases that you worked on, without mentioning names, of course?
Yes, it happens, but most of the time it's to help them, to guide them to see, is this really something, or do we need to alert the security service? That's more in that case where we start. And then also, as you say, lessons learned. We go in and help them to prevent it from not happening again, and to start all over to where we talked about security vetting and awareness training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and it's interesting because you mentioned that you're getting called in to verify that the incident is actually of that particular nature. Are there any cases where it wasn't? It was somebody who just happened to provide the information or did something with unknowingly, that they were not part of like larger scheme, but just basically out of and again, not knowing does not remove you from responsibility, of course. But were there any cases where it's just an honest mistake, that it wasn't part of a larger scheme?
Not when we're talking about these kind of cases. Not an honest mistake. It's more like if a person clicks on a link or talks too much. That's one thing as well. When we're at exhibitions and conferences, international conferences, then people end up in the hotel bar after a long day at the conference, and then they talk, and it I'm Swedish, so it's like people from Sweden and other countries that are not native English. It's like we believe that our languages are somewhat encrypted, so no one understands what we're talking about when we're in a hotel bar. So after a drink or two, you could get quite some good information from people hanging in the hotel bar, thinking that no one understands what they're talking about.
It's amazing. Yeah, because I guess the language barrier is just learning the language, and I'm assuming some of the adversaries have made the dedication like you did to learn how to speak Russian. So super interesting. So to wrap this up, and this has been a really great insight. Thank you for that. You mentioned that there is, because we're getting better, which is the positive side, we're getting better at protecting the organizations. The adversaries are trying to find, easier way, or just bypass the security controls and use the the insider threat is the go-to method. Do you see that increasing the next several years and becoming more prolific as we become better, or is it something that we're going to get to some sort of plateau and it's not going to get exploited? Because again, it sounds uh, if you look at zero day and malware and the technical piece of it, they use a lot of it is being used by common methods, right? They download these or get these zero day and they pay for it and they use some technical aspect to infect the end user machine. But for this particular insider recruitment, there's I think an elevated level of knowledge and expertise, and it takes a little longer. So you have to be really serious about getting into the organization as opposed to just being opportunistic, which I think a lot of the adversaries right now, especially around ransomware and malware and so on, it's very opportunistic. They go from one company to another trying to infect them and then get money from ransomware. But this requires an elevated levels of proficiency. What's your thoughts about where this particular area of human threat intelligence is going?
Well, I truly believe that this is something that we will see much more of. And as I mentioned, that even criminal organizations are doing that. They are offering like $1 million for the person on the inside to help them with a ransomware attack, to bring a memory stick on the inside, for example. So that makes it not that difficult to find a person who wants $1 million, I assume. As it's getting harder and harder to get to succeed with a cyber attack, also they will recruit people, and the state actors are probably not paying that amount, but they will always find someone who's not happy at work or with loyalty to somewhere else.
Yeah, amazing. So what's the easiest way for people to reach out to you, to consult with you, get advice, just see if there's anything you can help them with? What's the easiest way to contact you?
Well, the easiest way is probably LinkedIn, where you can find me. And Truesec also has an office in the US, so you can find us there. And of course in Sweden. And I would be happy to come to the US to help you if you need me.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely great. I'm hoping that things are going to be back on track. We've seen here some of the cases going up for the COVID, but I'm positive. We all have to be positive. So looking forward to potentially hosting you in one of the in-person events in New York City sometimes in the next coming year. And thank you very much for joining us today. Much appreciated. Thanks for everyone who listened and tuned in. Looking forward to seeing you all in the next one. Until then, be safe and be well.
Thank you, David.
Take care.